Okay, so we're holding Siman Kuf Hey in Taaruvot, and even though we've done some of the Seifim, Dalet and Hey, Vav and Zayin, we're just going to review them, read them inside, and then try to understand the musagim, the concepts behind them. The first part of Kuf Hey dealt with Kovush, dealt with the various other degrees of heat, talking about Isur and Heter coming in contact with each other in various forms. And here we're being introduced to a different concept of contact called sli, roasting. Heat is involved, and an additional concept of kedei netila as well, which is more than a kedei klipa. We explained that the netila was keroichav etzba, and etzba in this case is the thumb, even though etzba ordinarily, when you use the term etzba, it means the second finger. Here it means the thumb, and it means the width of the thumb, and which is about close to an inch, give or take, considerably more than a klipa. And when we talk about sli, we're talking about, for the most part, not that much liquid is involved. Because as we will see, the distinction, or the difference between sli and bishul is liquid. Even though tzli has some liquid, it's not sufficient to consider it bishul. In other words, it has to be just barely a little bit of liquid that can be there, and it still is considered baked or roasted and not cooked. Cooking has the power to transfer the taste all over the chaticha or all over the tafshil itself, the mixture, whereas tzli is not as powerful. We're talking about two pieces of meat that are close to each other in proximity, they're touching, and as a result of their contact, some blias are being transferred, but not more than that. And there is, of course, a situation where more than an atila can be transferred, and that is if one of them is fat. So even though we said sli by itself is not so powerful, if there is fat involved, sometimes it can penetrate more than the kedei netila. Yes, sli is roasting, right? Very, very powerful, right? But it's not. There's no liquid involved, so it can just go so far. If the two are next to each other, right? It can just go so far. So let's first go through the seifim, and then we'll explain what's going on here. So the Mechaber begins by telling us in Seif Dalet, "Bamed dvar mamur כשנופל לתוך התפשל, מפני שהרויטב מוילך פליטס האיסור מערבו בכל התפשל." Right? And that is a continuation of the previous seif, of nofal isur cham letoich heter, of cham the clear rishon, or filu isur tzon letoich heter cham. Over there we learned that everything is also because of tatah govar. So when you have tatah govar, the bottom one being very, very hot, it takes over, or overwhelms the tzoinen, the cold that is falling on top of it, and it answers it all completely. We're talking about the heat of a kli rishon. So that's what he means over here by medvar mamuk shenofa letoch hatavshil bnei sharoitev moilech plitas ha'isor ume'avo bechol hatavshil. So when you have roitev, you have the tam, the plita of the isor, being mixed everywhere. Aval isor ben cham ben kar shenofal al atzli. If you have an isser, whether it's hot or cold, that falls al atzli she'etz la'esh, there's no roitev, all it is the heat of the tzli, of the fire, eino oisa ela kedei netila shu ke'oi v'rochav etzba, which is the width of an etzba. So lefichoch yerech shetzolo begidoi, a thigh that was roasted with the gid hanoshe by mistake, the sciatic nerve, or chatichas isser shetzolem chatichas heter, two pieces of meat were barbecued by mistake next to each other. One was treif, one was kosher. And they're touching. You would have to remove kedei netila around. If they were touching, you would remove the kedei netila from the chatichas heter wherever it touched the isur. You don't have to be concerned about the whole thing being asur. You don't need shishim over here. You would just need a kedei netila. And we explained a little bit about how this can happen in the park. people want to barbecue, use the park's barbecue. It's treif. And it could even be ben yoima. Somebody used it that morning. It's not advisable to use it. Even if you're going to clean it, you have to really kasher it. Bring your own barbecue if you want to go do barbecue in your park. But it would be a kedei netila perhaps, at the most. There's no liquid involved. So it's the same halacha, similar halacha would apply in this kind of a situation. Roasting in a non-kosher oven, where there are blias, that would be a little bit different perhaps. We will see what happens when you put meat into a hot keli. So you're not having two pieces of meat adjacent to each other. You're having it in a keli. A keli has a little bit of a different din than a piece of meat. But these situations can come up. There are blias. You have to determine, of course, if it was ben yoima or not. You have an advantage if it was not ben yoima, because then the tam is pogum. But it does make a difference if something is just hot or if there was liquid involved. Same is true if a piece of Isser fell on top of a chaticha that was cooking, nikdera, shichutz l'roitev. This scenario is similar to the scenario in Basar v'cholav, where you have milk falling or dripping onto a cholent pot perhaps that's cooking, and there's some of the meat that you put into the cholent pot is sticking out of the roitev, and the rest is inside the roitev, and it fell on the one that's sticking out. V'lo nirag there, we're talking about a situation where you did not mix the pot. V'lo kisa oiso, you did not cover it. So eno oiso elo kedei netila. The most it will penetrate, and most that will become usher on the piece that is sticking out is kedei netila. Aval me'im hi beroitev, if it's already in the roitev. L'rashi kula u'l'ri afilu miktos, according to Rashi, all of it is inside, or ri, even if a portion of it is inside. Or afilu kula chutz l'roitev, but veneer, even though the whole thing is outside, but you mixed it up. Or kisak dera, covering it with the lid is the same thing, is equivalent, exactly the same halacha as in Basar v'cholav. Covering it with the lid would be equivalent to mixing it. Aroitev mefapea, we say that the liquid will spread the ta'atam, u'me'arbev v'nichnas b'kulon, it will enter everywhere. In other words, it will answer the whole thing. So here we have the exact same halacha that we have in Basar v'cholav, but there appears to be a little bit of a difference here, which I'm going to get into soon, about the chaticha itself being only asur kedetila. That was not mentioned in Basar v'cholav. This is a detail that I wanted to get into today that we didn't cover before. Yes?
I just want if what fell...
An Isser.
Well, no, Basar come, and what fell on it was milk.
Right.
It's the tila.
Yeah, that's exactly what I just said. That's what's interesting. Over there, it appears to be the same halacha, almost to the T. Okay? Over there, we don't apply the concept of netila and basar b'chalav. We just say that piece is asur. We're concerned about the rest of the pot now. We don't even say anything about how much of that. This is the piece is asur. Here, we're talking about this concept of kedei netila. They're both a form of tzli, because we're talking outside of roitev. There's no liquid, so there's no bishul. It's roast, it's heat. Heat only penetrates kedei netila.
But if the thing that fell on it, netila.
Yes, it should be. So we're going to figure out, that's going to be the question that I'm going to raise now soon. Why is that din different than this din? As far as the halacha over there, it doesn't mention anything about kedei netila. It just says that piece becomes asur when it was roasted.
So surprised and comment on it, I think,
yes,
is when we have a big problem, now since the milk itself is a liquid, the moment that one might think that now the condition a liquid, and it's no longer a question of roasting, but cooking.
Yeah, but it's just a little.
It doesn't need to be there liquid.
No. We're talking about milk. Yes.
It's talking about milk. It's talking about
Right,
liquid,
but nonetheless, it's just a little. It's not a lot of liquid. It's just a little bit of it.
So it's just a drop.
Yeah, a couple drops.
Had it been a lot of milk, he'd be right.
Well, of course.
Sure,
No question about it. Yeah, right. So we're going to talk about that. Yeah. But first, let's go through this seifin. So obviously, if everything is mixed up, the whole thing would be asur. And now he's saying an exception to the concept of the tila by tzli. That's only by yerachim gidoy. In the case of yerach of the hind leg with the sciatic nerve, both similar situations. It's a davar kochush. The meat is lean. It does not have the ability to spread throughout the whole chaticha. So that makes sense, that the most you have of a problem here is the penetration of a netila. Aval gedish shaman, if you roasted an entire goat, shetzalo bechelba, with its fat. By the way, you know that you can eat the fat, the forbidden fat, well, it's not forbidden fat, of a deer, a chaya. We're only concerned about the chalev of a cow, of a goat, of a sheep. Not the shuman, but the chalev. The chalev is the forbidden fats. The white layer is removed through a process called nikur, of the sciatic nerve, nikur of the chalev, nikur of the vridim, those veins that still contain blood. Before you salt the meat, you have to remove those things. You can't salt the meat with the chalev, you get into big trouble. So somebody by mistake, he was excited, or he was hungry, and just took the gedi. Let's put it on the fire, barbecue. Didn't bother taking out gida nosha, maybe, didn't bother taking out the chalev. He thought he knew how to shech. Yes, he may know how to shech, but that you're not done with it just when you shecht it. Even though, by the way, if you don't have salt, you can get away with it. You just roast it on an open pit where you allow the blood to drip. Then you don't need to salt the meat. So if you're stuck somewhere, you're not dying, of course, because then you can eat almost anything. But you just want to eat meat, and you know how to shech, and you have a kosher knife, of course. Then you don't have to worry about the salt as long as you just roast it and not cook it. To cook the meat, you have to first salt it. Especially, you got to learn how to do it, how to get the gidan out. Yeah, but you got to get every bit of it out, and it's pretty, and it's not that thick. And you don't want to ruin the meat either by carving everything out. So it's a kunz, as we say in Yiddish. It's a certain skill that you have to learn how to do it. So if you don't have 60, in the whole dig, also you cannot even eat from the top of the ear. Since it is fat, then we do say, even though all it is roasting, we say mefapea bechula. Mefapea means that it does spread everywhere. If it's lean, if the animal is a lean animal, even though it doesn't have 60 against the entire chalev, so what's going to make a difference is shaman, and that's it. If it's fatty, we're going to say it's going to spread. The chalev of an animal that is lean is also lean, betivoy, naturally. It will not spread. Now he adds an additional detail. Even if the chatichas isser that is being roasted together next to the chatichas heter, the isser is kochush, is lean. The chatichas heter shenitzles imor, but the chatichas heter that was roasted with a shemina is the one that's fat. Ha-isser mefapea bechulo. What's going to happen now? The isser somehow is going to be able to travel all the way to the heter, even though it's the heter that is fatty, and the isser is lean. The isser cannot go by itself too far. Just kedei netila. No, but the heter is fat. The heter is being in close proximity to the isser, so the heter is going to be mefatem, going to fatten up the isser, and then the isser will be able to go all over the heter and make the whole heter also unless there's shishim. Isser mefaper bekulo, bekol dover sheyesh lo pipua. Now, an additional halacha, anything that has a pipua, shenof al mokum yodua, it fell to a known place, a known spot, mechaticha betzli. Even though you may have 60 to cancel out the isser, you still, according to the Rashba, this is according to the Rashba, not according to the Rambam. Tzorach netilas mokum, this is a chumrah. You still need you have shishim, but it touched that particular spot, like the Aruch HaShulchan explains. The isser is like be'in, it's there. I touched it. So even though you have shishim, still got to take out netila on that spot. Netilas mokum from that spot. But this is only a chumrah.
But logically,
yes.
Since I say this will not spread, that's what we're talking about here.
It will spread if it's shaman.
So if it will spread.
It will spread, right. It does spread.
It does not.
Nevertheless, according to the Rashba, you still need a netilas mokum. The Rambam says once you have shishim, it's like in cooking. You don't need to do anything. The shishim takes care of it. You don't need to take an additional netila. When is the netila be'ikar adin? When it's kochush. When it's kochush, we say it penetrated kidei netila, and it actually did penetrate.
And that's actually a kula.
What do you mean a kula?
Well, it's a kula that it's kachush. We don't have to be, if it was fatty, it's spread throughout the whole.
Well, that's all.
The whole piece.
Yeah, but that's all it
I
goes.
don't need 60.
It's not a kula. That's as far as.
I don't need 60.
Yeah, but the din of tzli means it only goes that far.
Right.
That's all. It's not a kula, but it's the netila is meikar adin. As I will explain soon, what's the difference between the ikar adin and a chumrah?
And the mefapea.
Yeah, in the case of the pia that according to the Rashba, the Mechaber brings down the halacha, you remove in the tila, that's only chumrah. It's a chumrah. Somehow, if you didn't do it, it's not as bad as if it's meikar adin. If it's kochush, they're touching each other. The treif and the kosher meat are touching each other. Now you really got to remove it. It's meikar adin. You have to remove it. You have no choice. And as I said, when you go to go to a non-kosher market or to a non-Jewish market, I should say, and you buy kosher fish, you first have to, of course, identify that it's a kosher fish, that it has scales. But if the goy uses his knife, the same knife that he used to cut up some squid, some catfish, and some crabs or whatever, and he used that to chop off the head of the salmon, you can just rinse the edges, or preferably even to cut the edges. You're taking off a small piece. It's cold, but it's duchka de sakina. You do have a little sharp object, so we are machmir a little bit to cleanse it off, to remove the fatty residues that may be at the edges. But there's no heat, so it's not going to go kedin tila. It's not going to go further, for sure not young kedin tila. There's no heat involved. Yes.
He's saying in the case of
Uh-huh.
if you have shish, it doesn't matter whether it's fat, whether it's
No, we're talking about if it's fatty, then if you have shishim, then the whole thing is mutter. You have shishim. Because it cancels out all the chalev. Right?
So according to the Rashba, you have still, like, even in that case.
Yeah, but it's a chumrah only.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, and that's what the Mechaber brings down. Okay.
The Rambam passes more
In this case, yeah. V'chol mevushol, the Ramah says, V'chol mevushol b'lo roitev ofui dino ketzli. You want to know what tzli is? Anything that is cooked without liquid, fried, without any liquid, no oil.
without any extra.
Dino ketzli b'chol dover. This is an important halacha, by the way, for hagala too. Do you need hagala? Do you need libum by a frying pan? Frying pan. How are you going to kasher it? Something that is used with fire, the halacha is you need fire. Something that is used with liquid, you need liquid. Hagala is a way of kashering a pot or pan or whatever that was used with liquid. You used it with liquid, you use liquid to kasher it, boiling hot water. Something that is used by irui, you need irui. However it is used, that is how you use it. Something that is always used cold, rinse it, right? That's how you kasher. An oven, of course, you need to raise it to a very high temperature in order to accomplish libun, right? But in libun, there's something called libun kal, which we're sometimes lenient for frying pans. You can put it into an oven, even if it's not self-cleaning oven, for a little bit of while, and that will accomplish a libun of sorts for the frying pan. The problem is with some frying pans is if you have a rubber handle, I don't think it's a good idea to stick it in the oven. It's not only going to melt, it's going to stink up your kitchen. So if you use it with oil, then you can do hagala for the frying pan. But if it's a Teflon, it's a problem. Because Teflon, the whole idea of Teflon is that you don't need oil, and you may not be using it with oil. So therefore, for Pesach, you don't want to kasher a Teflon frying pan, because you can't really kasher it. So just buy yourself a new one. And with treif, it would be a problem too. I mean, how are you going to make libun to it? And destroy the whole thing too. You destroy the thing. You may not therefore do a good libun. Anything that you may destroy, you're going to be careful not to destroy, so you're not going to do it right. So it all depends. But technically, if you use the torch, then of course you can kasher almost anything with the torch. Yeah. Just don't burn your house down. All right, so that's why we need to know what tzli is. So he says anything that is mevusha below roitev or for your baked dino ketzli bechol dover for everything. Some say we don't know for sure the difference between kochosh and shaman. We're not such experts. Therefore, yesh leso becholin in the Ramah. Many achronim agree. Let's just forbid everything adi ikashishim until you have 60. We don't know which one is lean, which one is fat. Somebody put some burgers, non-kosher burgers, next to your meat. Was it fatty, not fatty? I mean, are you going to try to figure it out? So the whole thing would be also unless you have shishim. But Filu Ego Shishim Tzorch Netilas Makam. He passes like the Mechaber. Even if there's Shishim, you still need the Netila. Ochi Nahug, that's the custom. V'dafka be'isur, chelev or shar isur. The shar or shar nun is obviously it has to be something that has some fat, like chelev. Aval be'isur de lo shar b'shar nun is something that for sure has nothing, no fat whatsoever. V'vadek chochosh, everybody agrees that it's chochosh. Eno isur akid netila, the halacha remains. The Shach says that he's only talking about an isur de rabbanan because he wants to prove that, how are you going to know if it's, even in Melicha where Machman he says. So the Shach wants to be a little bit stricter here. But from the Ramah, it's understood that if you know for sure that it's a kochush, that it has nothing to do with fatty, it's some kind of a non-kosher food that has nothing to do with fat, and you don't have to ask for more than a kedei netila. This is actually going to help us a little bit in understanding some concepts that we're going to soon see. Okay, next halacha, davar sheyesh lo piyapua b'tzli, something that has a piyapua b'tzli. Im oyo echad cham ve'echad tzoinen, atachton goiver. So here the Mechaber is saying you have piyapua, but that's a very important detail here. He's not just talking about a tatah gover b'tzli. He's talking about a tatah gover situation with tzli that has piyapua. That's why he says this halacha. He does not tell us without that what the halacha is without that. That we have to go see somebody else, what the Forshim say. But he says, davar sheyesh lo piyapua b'tzli. Imoyo echad cham ve'echad tzoinen. One is hot, one is cold. Atachton goiver. The bottom one is, as usual, will be the stronger one. If the hat falls on tzoinen, that's interesting. Even if he has piyapua, so what? Tatah gavar still works. The most it can do is a kedei klipa. Look at what he says. Hakol. Wait a minute. Hakol also, aren't we talking about tzli? Yeah, but remember the halacha reads davar sheyesh lo piyapua. So what if tatah gavar? If it's tzli, it's tzli. I mean, after all, what is tzli? Tzli doesn't make a difference how they're next to each other, top of each other. They're both getting hot. Even if they're both hot, it's only kedei netila. So how could you ever have tatah gavar by tzli that it answers the whole thing? Because davar sheish lo piyapua. So that's seif vav. You have to remember it's talking about only davar sheish lo piyapua. That's why it's also the whole thing. Otherwise, tzli is always kedei netila if there's no liquid involved. But if it's piyapua, if it's chelev, shaman or whatever, something fatty, that is when you can have a tzli that it answers everything. Zayin, hode chatichas isur seres chaverto, that which one chaticha answers the next one, benigiyosed only by touching. Dafka keshi isur machmas atzmo. Now he's introducing to us an additional important difference in isurim. One is called an isur machmas atzmo, and one is called an isur balua, which we've spoken about before. So when an isur can touch a heter and make it usur, it's only when isur is machmas atzmoi. In other words, machmas atzmoi, it emits the flavor, like a nevela, can go nevela, or basar b'chalav. Now listen carefully. Here the Mechaber is saying, Mechaber, not everybody will go along with this one. This is interesting. Either a nevela or basar b'chalav. But basar b'chalav, Mechaber says, is an isur machmas atzmoi. Once that piece of meat absorbed chalav and became asur because it's basar b'chalav, it's a chanan, it's asur, it's a nevela, it's an isur machmas atzmo, even though it has an isur balua in it, the chalav. Mechaber is considering this an isur machmas atzmo. So if you have a nevela or basar b'chalav, touching it, it emits the flavoring kedei netila. Unless, of course, there's shanunis and chelev and so forth, then it's asur kedei kula. All right. If all it has is an isur shebolo machmas, it was a piece of heter meat that became treif because somebody cooked it in a pot that was treif. That's one example, as we're going to see in the Ramah. He cooked it in a pot of binyoima. And this kosher, oh no, I cooked it in a treif pot. Well, it's treif.
Oh, it's an S60.
Yeah, well, usually. It's treif. Oh no, what do we do now? It's treif. Give it to the dog. Not if it's basar b'chalav, by the way.
No.
Can't benefit. So when you buy dog food, make sure it has no basar b'chalav. Yeah, you can't benefit from it.
Does the basar be nevela anyway? by a dog food.
No, it makes no difference.
So then of Hana.
Basar sure, because it's a behemoth tahora. Yeah, unless it was camel or something.
Pork.
It makes no difference. Yeah. No, obviously, if it was other things, yeah, it wouldn't apply.
Pork.
Right.
It would have to be actually beef.
Actually, beef.
Beef, you've got a problem. But if it's pork with milk.
So that's why you can't work for McDonald's and make cheeseburgers, because it's an issur of bishul. You can't put the cheese meat, even though you're not eating it. The bishul, there's issur of bishul, achila, and hana.
Right.
All three.
Hana, bishul and hana.
Yeah.
So the one who is actually cooking it bishul and the one who's ringing it up at the cash register has.
Well, that's a question. That's not so simple.
He's getting paid to ring up
getting
a cheeseburger.
Well, that's a question. There is a question if you're allowed to work behind the cashiers. If that's hana.
Even packaging.
It's not a direct hana.
Even packaging.
Yeah. What about a janitor?
Okay, but even packaging in the brown bags.
Yeah, it could be a problem. Yeah.
Unless it's difficult to find a header. I know a case where they.
Yeah. That's a question. Yeah. Find yourself a better job somewhere else.
Putting in the freezer.
Yeah.
Would you say that the chayla?
Chaylev is not also b'hano, right? Only also b'cholav, kilei kerem, avodah zara, right?
Now I hear it over and over again. Maybe you could comment on it. That very often people say of meat that absorbed milk, they refer to the milk in the piece of meat as the choira. The milk by itself is not an isur.
Yeah, we're going to get into that. We're going to talk about the din of basar b'cholav. Is it an isur balua or really is it machmas atzmoi? Right. So far from Siv Zayin, the mechaber seems to imply the vela and basar b'cholav are exactly the same. They're isur machmas atzmoi. If they touch another piece of meat, it's kedei netila. But aval im ein bo isur ela ma shebola b'mokom acher. All it is a piece of meat that it absorbed a blia of isur. It was cooked by mistake in a treif pot, which was ben yoim, of course. Or somehow it absorbed because it was cooked somewhere, but it absorbed a blia of an isur. It's not isur machmas atzmoi. It in itself is a kosher piece of meat, but it contains a blia, an absorption of an isur. Eino seres acheres anogas. Boy, it will not affect it at all. Afilu nitzur yachad, they will roast together. Not even kedei netila. Wow. What it is emitting upon contact is its own flavoring. The basar, it's not transferring over its blia that it absorbed. The chaylev, the blia of the pork in the pot or pan that it was cooked in. That, the sliya, the roasting, the heat, does not have the ability to go that far. Think about it. Isur machmas atzmoi goes as far as kedei netila. It doesn't go that far. But that's because it's an isur machmas atzmoi. But to take the blia, shove it all the way into the heter, it doesn't have that koach. The heat is not that hot, it's not that powerful. Without roitev, blias will not come out. That's a rule, by the way, klal. Without roitev, blias don't come out. Blias from food.
You read my mind.
Yes.
The pot was
Right. We'll see in the Ramah. The pot itself can emit its own flavors even without liquid.
Even
with what?
The shalia, or is that
Shuman? What?
the fat?
Shuman, yeah. No, there's no shuman right now. We're talking, forget about shuman right now. You have here a piece of meat that has a blia. We haven't spoken about shuman yet.
Okay.
The din of sli, kedei netila, does not apply to isur balua, only isur machmas atzmoi. The roasting, the heat cannot take the isur balua. This is a piece of meat that was cooked in a non-kosher pot. It absorbed the blias, as an example of isur balua, right? Now, you're roasting it, you're cooking, you're barbecuing it, next to other pieces of chicken or schnitzel, meat, whatever it is. It will not even go kedei netila, because it's not also machmas atzmoi. If you cook it, of course, that's a different story. You need shishim, it's chanan b'shar yisurim, for those who hold chanan b'shar yisurim, right? But it's not, you understand? So tzliya can save the day. If it's only barbecuing heat without liquid, it can make a big difference.
Now you're saying interesting, which
Yeah.
I think is in the Ramah.
Right.
Namely, those who hold Hanan Bashar Isur,
Right.
they do make the decision here of Isur versus Isur Machmas Atzma when it comes to Sli and Kedei Netila. If they hold Hanan Bashar Isurim, they should say the whole piece of it, because of the Isur that it's absorbed. The whole piece of it is now Hanan, because it holds Hanan Bashar Isurim.
Right.
So this Hanan of Shari Surim should now also Asa Kedei Tila as
No, that they don't.
because it's the Rabbanan.
That's exactly. It doesn't really become like this. They would say in the yeshivish world, it does not become a hefts of an isur.
So even though it's Hanan, it's not an isur machmas atzmo.
Right. It's still not an isur machmas. It's still an isur balul. And why is it an isur balul and not an isur machmas atzmo? Only because of ef shel esoichdoi, in a sense.
So Legabe,
which is why Basar b'chalav also, by the way, remains an isur machmas atzmo.
So the nafkamina between isur balua that's Hanan and isur balua that's not Hanan is when you're cooking it in the second pot. Because if it's an isur balua that's Hanan, you need to sequence the whole piece and not only the isur.
Yeah, that's correct.
So no, only if you be cooking.
Only if you be cooking, then you have.
But by sleep,
it doesn't go.
Hanan,
it just won't go. The blia won't go without roitev. That's an important rule to keep in mind. Blias will not travel without roitev from food. So afilu nitzlu yachad. Bamed vor mamurim. One more exception. He says, I just told you that an isur balua won't go too far, but that's only bamed vor mamur kishabola isur sheino mefapea. If the isur is not an isur that is mefapea. If it's chelev is mefapea. Avabolo min advar mefapim metivon naturally can go in shuman or serious chavesu. It will make the one that's adjacent close to it bein betzli bein benugasu bezu cham becham or regardless of the type of heat, roasting, touching each other cham becham, they're both hot, or betachtoino, the bottom one being hot, the elyono tzonenes, even the top is cold. Once you have piyapua, like in Siva we saw, but here the chidush is that even if the isur balua it has the piyapua, that's the chidush here. The blia is piyapua, she'isur balua be'atzmo mefapea v'yosim bechaticha lechaticha. It can travel from one chaticha to chaticha. Now, what's interesting about all of this is that we have here in this piyapua a din that some agree and some don't agree. When the isur is fat, it's not a problem. We understand that. The isur is fat. Everybody seems to agree. It's fatty. It can go beyond the netila. The big chiddush here that the mechaber doesn't present to us, but it will help us in dealing with the situation of hefsed meruba, are two chidushim here. The chidush of pitum, mefatem. If they remember, the heter is the one that's fat. The heter is mefatem, the isur. There are some poiskim, some rishonim. There's no such a thing as a din of mefatem. We don't hold by it. That's very helpful to know that. Mefatem, heter can mefatem the isur. That's a chidush. That the isur is fatty, I understand. The isur goes farther than just a kedei netila. But that the heter is the one that's fat, and the heter is influencing the isur, and in turn the isur now is going to make the heter asur, that's a big chiddush. And by the way, when we say pit mefatem, we're only saying it for now. Now that piece of meat, you took it away. Was it transformed to a fatty piece of meat because of it was with the heter? The answer is no. When we say heter mefatem the isur, we only say at the time that they're roasting together, close to each other, the heter is mefatem the isur. And it becomes so fatty that the isur is able to go beyond the kedei netila. But this doesn't mean that this piece of meat now, this isur piece of meat, has now been transformed to become a fatty piece of meat. It was lean before. You understand? You follow me? It will remain piece of lean meat. Next time around, if you do it again, it's lean.
Right.
But now, it's sitting in proximity to a heter that is shaman, it will be a problem. That's all.
What I don't understand from what you said so far about this topic,
right?
Instead of making such a big problem of saying that the shuman of the head affects the isser such that isser now can travel,
okay,
why not say a fatty piece of heter facilitates the travel of the isser in it?
It does, yeah, it does. Yeah, when we get into the concepts, we'll talk about that, how it actually happens.
Okay.
Yeah. Chol zeh, the Ramah says, is bebeis chatichas, 2 pieces of meat. Aval kli shebola isser, when a kli is bolei an isser, treif. Oiser heter shenogea bo, it will, even though it has a blia, it will.
No water,
there's no water. Oiser heter shenogea bo, afilu be'isser sheino shamen. No mechanism. What's the difference between a kli that has a blia and a piece of meat that has a bliya. The Ramah doesn't seem to be arguing in the din of the mechaber, even though this raises a lot of questions as the Taz goes through it about Isur Balua. The Ramah says something that there is some commentaries, of course, the Shach and Taz talk about it, but it's not such a big chidush. They both actually agree, and they actually give an explanation to the Ramah. Why, if a kli has a bliya, there's no liquid involved. If you cook something in it, or even if you don't cook something, I mean, you put it's hot. The pot is hot. Kli rishon, roasting, right? You put something in down, it becomes aser. There's no. What did we say before? There's such a din that there's no transfer of bliyas without roitev. It just doesn't go. You need roitev, but you don't need roitev from a keli. The bliya of a keli is different than the bliya of a machal, of a food. A machal is considered to have a real bliya, and not a keli. Why? A keli also has a bliya. I mean, what's the difference between the two? So the way the Shach and Taz explain this is that plita, emitting a tam, only comes about from a machal. In other words, a machal's plita will be different than the plita. In other words, they both have bliyas, but the plita from a machal will be different than the plita of a keli. A keli, because it doesn't really have a bliya, doesn't really have a bliya the way a machal does, the plita comes out. The plita is able to come out. In other words, it doesn't have a true plita coming from a bliya that has been absorbed in it. The plita of a keli is not the plita of a machal. Again, a machal, a piece of a food that has a bliya, its plita will not go anywhere. Okay?
If I understand you correctly, it's a new concept for...
Yeah, but let me just finish this. A machal, okay, let me read it from the inside. Davka machal sheyesh lo ma lifloit migufo. It has something to bring out from it. As a bliya eno halaches below roitev. It actually has something that it can, from it, that it can emit. It needs liquid to actually remove it, to emit it. Okay? Aval kli she'ein bo plito migufo. It's not a real plita from its goof. It's just something stuck there. Yeah. As yotze shapim mashabola. It comes out. It doesn't need the roiter. So in other words, the plita here is different than the plita there. By machal, the plita is something of its own. It needs help to come out. By keli, it doesn't need help.
Aren't we saying something actually quite... A machal, besides the bliya that it absorbs, has its own plita of its own goof to emit. Itself.
Yes.
It never absorbed any isser. It's just the heter.
Right.
It will emit its own bliya.
Right.
A pot is a piece of metal. It doesn't emit of its own. It's not food that emits its own plita.
Right.
So by Michael that is busy emitting its own plita, the fact that it's emitting its own plita prevents it from emitting the bliya it absorbed of the isser, because it's emitting its own plita, its own taste.
Yeah.
A pot that has no plita of its own to emit because it's just a pot. So the only thing it can emit, and therefore will emit when heat affects it, is the bliya it absorbed.
Right.
Again, which is not so by a piece of meat that absorbed an isser. It's busy now meeting its own taste.
Sure.
So the hit is affecting it to the point that it's emitting its own taste. But the bliya that it absorbed, the heat is not strong enough to have the meat emit that as well in addition to its taste.
Right.
Pot has no own taste. So pot will emit whatever.
Yeah, whatever it has, it will expel it. Yeah.
Okay.
It? Yeah. So I think maybe we won't go into right now into Sif Ches. We have time. I'll cover the last Sif, even though it is related. It has to do with the kidney, but I don't want to just go too far. Let's now review concepts. Let's see what has happened so far. We've spoken about a different kind of scenario involving heat, which is called sli. And we've spoken about piapua, that is a more intense kind of sleep, perhaps we can call it. And we spoke about the difference between an Isser Machmas Asmoy and an Isser Bolua. Okay? Now, sli itself, how do we know that sli penetrates at all? Where do we learn it from? Doesn't say it very clearly, but we learn it from Melicha, believe it or not. Because the Gemara says, the Meliach keroteach ditzli, You want to know how powerful Melicha could be? It's kiroteach that's Sli. Oh, really? Oh, so now I know that Sli does something too. It's interesting. That's how the Gemara talks about Sli. That Melicha kiroteach the Sli.
It presupposes it.
Right, exactly. So the roteach is of Tzli is Asr. So now, what do we understand? What the Ramah brings down, the two chatichas, this is earlier in the Siman, that are next to each other. Remember the Ramah talking about two chatichas that are very hot from the Rishon, Chomkli Rishon, that are close to each other? Right? He never talked about Tzli yet then. Remember, we were talking about the Targava, we talked about Kovush, we talked about all those things we haven't spoken. And then the Ramah says, what about chatichas that are close, not one top of each other? That's the Targava. What about if they were next to each other? That they were both hot, okay? That they're both the heter is asur. The whole thing is asur. It must be, now that we're going back to that halacha after we know tzli and shaman and all that, it must be that halacha must be talking about that there is piapua. Because two pieces of meat that they're both hot without liquid, what is that called? It's called tzli. So even though he didn't tell us that, remember the Ramah? Right? Why? Why is that kol asur? Two pieces of meat that are next to each other, they're both hot. There's a question of what happens if one is hot and one is cold. Okay, we discussed that. But if the two of them are hot, great. It's asur? Why? It's Tzli. Tzli is only asur kedei netil. But now that we learned everything about Tzli, we go back to that halacha of the Ramah, and where he has two pieces of meat next to each other that are hot, mikli rishon, he must be talking about that it's shaman. Otherwise, why should it be a completely asur? We have to assume that it's asur, right? Because every tzli has a little bit of liquid, Every tzli has to have a little bit, but it's not enough to make it a bishul. Okay? And therefore, if it's going to be asur, if it's going to asur completely, it must be talking about its shaman. So that's one point that we now understand better after learning the halachas of tzli. Now, what's interesting about the example of chaticha sticking out of the gdera, half of it is inside or all of it is outside, right? There's a machloikis, the Rashi and Ri. What's the machloikis? According to Rashi, let me see it inside. If it's in the roifet the Rashi kula, then it mixes up everything. So Rashi says kula, meaning what? That if it's not kula inside, according to Rashi, it will only aser kedei netila. So according to Rashi, that which is sticking out, is that a kula or a chumrah? How do you interpret Rashi's position? Is he being machmir or is he being... Rashi says if the whole thing is not inside, if it's sticking out, it's only asas kedei netila, right? And the Ri says the whole thing is like it's considered part of the tafshul, and you need shishim in the tafshul keneged. It appears to be that Rashi is being mekel, because you don't need shishim keneged the whole thing now. But in reality, there's a chumrah here too.
Because shishim won't help you.
Because you need a kedei netila on that piece.
Won't help you.
You see what I mean? And the Chochmah Sodom says that even though we're passing like the Ri, in this case, yeah, that afilu miktsasa, that the whole thing can combine, we should be machmir like Rashi to take off an netila from the piece that's sticking out. Right? Next point. The gabe the machloikes of the poiskim where the isur shomin that has 60, if it still need a netila or not, the mokom shenoga isur. We said that the Rashba says that you need to take off a netila, and that's how the Mechaber paskins. The Rambam says you don't need to. So the Pri Chodosh and the Minchas Kohen explain that netila is only a chumrah. Okay? Like we explained before. As opposed to what? As opposed to any typical tzli of kochush, the netila that you're going to be removing is me'ikar adin. And by the way, from when you take from the kochush or from the heter, a netila, you got to take it from all around. Unless you know where it touched. It only touched here. Then you don't have to worry about the rest of the meat. But they were roasted together. You got to take a netila all around the piece of meat, not just in one area.
Just to clarify, when we're talking about holding on a piece sticking, we're talking about cooking, not sleep. It's sticking out of
right,
the
in that case, yeah. But it's a form of sleep. Of the piece that's sticking out is a form of sleep because there's no roitiv there, right? That which is sticking out is heat. without liquid. So there's a netila. Right.
The Ramah calls it, isn't the Ramah Chadan V'Shari story?
No, we don't get into Chanan yet. No. All right, so that's as far as the netila me'ikar adin, not a chumrah, because it's kochush. It goes so far, it actually asers the netili all around. But that's where we have Rabbi Akiva Eiger telling us that if you don't know, you only know it hit one spot, but you don't know which spot, it's batal beroiv. The netila that you have to take off from that spot, it's batal in all the netilas. Then you wouldn't have to worry about it. Even though this is a netila me'ikar adin, you wouldn't have to worry about it. Otherwise, you would have to take off a netila everywhere. But if you know for a fact that it only touched in one spot, you wouldn't have to worry about it. If you don't know where that spot is. If you do know, of course, you have to remove it. Okay, now that we understand how tzli functions, how many conditions do you need for tzli to make, for a non-kosher piece of meat to make a kosher piece of meat also completely? In tzli, you need two conditions. What are the two conditions? This is a question, right? What are the two conditions that you need in order that tzli, not bishul, should make a piece of meat completely asur? Unless you have shishim, of course. You need two conditions. What are they? One is that the isur is an isur shaman. Otherwise, it's only going to look at the netila, right? And if the isur is not a shaman, at least the heter should be shaman, according to those who hold mefatem, right? That's condition number one. Condition number two, they both are hot. Okay? Or, if they both are not hot, at least the bottom one is hot. Tatar gover. But remember, tatar gover can only do its job, in this case of tzli, if their isur is shaman. Otherwise, tatar gover would not, if there's no isur shaman, it's not going to go so far.
So if the tatar gover, the head, it's not going to...
Oh, very good question. What happens in the tatar gover where the heter on top is shaman? Very good question. We're going to talk about that. Yeah, that's, I think, a pretty good one.
So we're talking now where it does to be the tatar gover, or can it be...
No, it has to be, the isur is at the bottom. What? The one that's hot.
Oh, the isur has to be the hot one? In fact, a heter
No,
that is hot...
the heter, if the heter is hot, okay, and the isur is cold,
That it won't...
okay, so what's going to be the problem?
No kadina.
Huh?
No kadina.
No, you have a din of tatar gover,
Yeah,
right?
the bottom one is hot, but it happens to be
Right,
a heter.
right. So it's not a problem in this case.
Why?
We're talking about the one that's going to be a problem is the one that's in the bottom, not the one that's in the top. Okay?
I don't understand.
Yeah.
If we have one thing that was, just generally speaking, bottom hot, one is hot and one is cold.
Okay.
If the bottom one is hot and the top one is cold, the temperature of the mixture is called hot.
It's going to be mavliya. It's going to be mavliya, and it's going to be maflit. I should say yes.
Yeah.
So yeah,
that's really what it is.
right. So as far as your question is concerned, with the heter and isur, it's not going to make that much of a
It doesn't
difference.
help me if the isser is at the top.
It doesn't.
bottom one is
Exactly. Yeah, I'm sorry. Yeah, it does not help if the isur is in the top or the isur at the bottom.
As long as the hot one is at the top.
The bottom one is the hot one.
Yeah.
Yes, exactly so. Yeah, but it will make a difference in Melicha. I think there will be a small, somewhat of a difference. And here, with your question of shaman, it will make a difference. But hot and cold, the chidush of the tagover is the one that's in the bottom is hot, and the one on top is cold. Then it has the koach of being mavliya or being maflit. Whereas if the top one is hot, right, then it's only kedei klipa. So let's take the situation where the top one is hot and the bottom one is cold. So if the top one is asur, it will be mavliya kedei klipa only. Even by tzli, by the way. Even by tzli. Because the cold one is at the bottom.
The cold one is not at the bottom.
Is at the bottom. The isur will be mavliya only kedei klipa. Or you can say the other way around. The bottom one will only absorb a kedei klipa. If the heter is the one that's on top, and it's hot, and the isur is cold, also.
And are we talking
Also
about...
a kedei klipa,
Right.
because it's hot. Tatar gavar.
Oh, the bottom one is cold again.
It's cold again.
Right, okay.
So
Are we
kedei
talking-
klipa,
Are
yes.
we talking right now about cooking, about tzli, or it does difference?
It's all tzli. It's all a form of contact without any lid.
Without any liquid.
Yeah.
So the tatagavar is the exact same one as in cook, or is let's say if the bottom is a liquid.
Yeah.
Or-
The halacha is similar, except that by tzli, Without shaman, it will be klipa, if the top one is hot. Okay?
Well, the same thing is true also
Okay?
by
And I'm sorry, if the top one is hot or the bottom one is hot, it will not even be a kedei netila, even though it's the Torah.
So by tzli, it will only be klipa even if the bottom one is hot and the top one is cold. Is that?
Yeah, because that's what the Mechaber said. Dover sheyesh lo pipua betzli. אם היה אחד חום ואחד צוינן, התחתן גויבר, לפיכך אם נופל חום על צוינן, אין אוסר לכדי קליפו, ואם נופל צוינן על חם, אם אין בהתר כנגד האיסור, הכל אוסר. So that one, sorry. So I'm sorry. So that one was a kol also because there was pipua. If it was not pipua, if there was no, right, so you have kedei netila. All right? But I think we're going to look into that a little bit more because there might be some other opinions about that. What's it in by tato gover when it's not piyapua? But one thing is for sure: if the top one is hot, it's still a klipa and not kedei netila.
And that would even be true by cooking, correct? Even if it wasn't sleep about cooking, it would also just be by the top one is
Yes, that's always true, right? Next concept: the makor, the source that the belia in a chaticha does not go out without roitev. Okay, what we said before, that the belia does not go out from the chaticha without roitev. You need roitev, otherwise it just goes kedei netila. Is a rashba. Actually,
it doesn't go at all.
It doesn't go at all unless it's a fatty belia. Right. That's a rashba, that the belua does not go out without roitev, because that's what the Mechaber was telling us here from the tour. And that's the cloud, the concept that we spoke about, that ena nesa yochol leser mokum sha'isu ba'asmu yochol lechon, which we're going to talk about next. That's a rashba. The blia does not go out without roitev. Where is that? That's from a Gemara. And that Gemara seems to say something that we are familiar with, that if a tipas cholov fell on a chaticha that is outside the roitev, that chaticha is osir. But what about the other chatichas that are touching it? The other chatichas are not osir. So we see from that chaticha that is outside of the roitev absorbed, but that's as far as it went. It remained there. It did not travel further. Because think about it. That's what we have in Basar b'chalav. If anything, that becomes aser. Okay, does it aser the whole thing? Does it aser kedei netila? But it doesn't go beyond. So you see how we learn from that. We infer from that. It's quite obvious that a belia will not go beyond, because otherwise, why should that chaticha now in turn make the other chatichas aser? With basar b'chalav, we have it sticking out. We're concerned about that chaticha now. You didn't mix it yet. The rest, it's not a problem. The Mechaber, of course, says you use a kapela. There are other situations, but forget about kapela right now. That chaticha, if anything, becomes aser, but it doesn't affect the other ones.
Why would you use it? There's no tal.
In that,
in this belia, there's no.
If you could use a kapela, you could always see if there's a tam or not. Maybe it's just
He holds there is
no tal.
Where?
You got two pieces of meat exactly.
Right.
How would it have there's no.
נופל חולוב לתוך דרך של בשר, תואם עם החתיכה שנופל עליה חולוב. אם אין בתום חלב, הכל מותר. אם יש בחתיכה תימסון, נעשה עושה חתיכה. Right? So, according to Mechaber, that's the first thing you do. Maybe it's just no big deal. The milk fell on it, but it fell off. It doesn't really mean that it was absorbed. It could be a big chaticha too that you don't even feel it. So it's bottled in the chaticha. But we know we don't use a kapela. So anyway, so based on that sugya, that the cholov doesn't go any further than beyond the chaticha, what do we see from that? That cholov is also nechshav, it's considered kochush. If that's the case, let's go back to our original question that we asked in the beginning. Then why does that chaticha only become also kedei netila? And over here, it's aser kedei netila, and over there it becomes completely aser. That's the Shach's question. Shach asks the question, why over there the whole thing is aser? If based on what we just explained, that it doesn't go too far, it should only be aser kedei netila. There's no roitev. What's the answer? So he gives 3 tiruts in there. He wants to say that maybe milk is different. Chalav is shaman. but not everybody agrees with that. By the way, blood is also not considered shaman if the blood is an isur balua. Cholav, he says perhaps cholav is shaman, but not everybody agrees with that. The second teretz is because of the hevel, the vapor over there. You have a pot over there. In that case, you have a pot. So you have vapor spreading everywhere, and maybe that's what's causing the whole piece, in that case of basar b'cholav, to be asur. And the third explanation that he gives is maybe over there we're talking about that the chaticha basar is shmeina. So if the chaticha's basar is fat, that's why that piece becomes entirely asur, and not just a kedei netilah. But obviously, if we knew it was not, then maybe it should only be asur kedei netilah. Why do we have to worry about the whole piece? I'm not sure. Well, obviously, it doesn't tell us the size of the piece, and maybe the milk went all over it. The whole thing just becomes asur. Maybe he's not really telling us the halacha of the kedei netilah, because maybe over in that particular example, it's just that he's telling us that this is asur and not the rest. How much is asur is another question, which he doesn't get into. He gets into Hilchos Taaruvot. But anyway, the Shach has a good question when you start comparing this to this. They're very similar. So either you say it's basar shaman, or maybe because of the vapor of the pot, that's what makes it. The next concept, just a few more minutes, the next concept was the concept that we said of Eina Neser Yochel Leser B'Mokom Sha'Isur Be'atzmo Yochel Leilech Sham, right? Remember that? The Isur only goes so far. So something became Asur because of the Isur. That's called a Nesar. Nesar because of an Isur. So the Nesar now in turn cannot Asur something else more than what the Isur, where the Isur can go. If the Isur can only go kedei netilah, then the Nesar you think could do more damage than the Isur? That's a klal that everybody seems to agree with. Tosfos and the Rashba learned this from the Isur, from the klipa, from the whole idea of a klipa. Something that became asur kedei klipa does not go beyond the klipa.
So the whole thing would become asur.
Right. Stops by klipa. Why don't you say, well, that klipa now in turn asurs the next klipa? We don't say that. The Ran says because you don't say chanan by klipa. You don't say the term chanan. That thing doesn't really become asur. That's as much as it became asur. That's it. It stops. You don't say chanan. But they explain that basically it cannot go anymore. That's as far as it will go. And that's where we learned this concept from. So therefore, based on this klal, we have some trouble over here with the Tur, because some of this was quoted from the Tur. The Mechaber says that the Tur that says that hetem is mefatem isur, kochush, we can understand that a little bit. What's the svor of hetem mefatem isur? Because either you hold like the sugya of reicha milsa. There's a sugya about basar shchuta and basar nevela that were cooked together, roasted together. Shchuta and nevela, right? Kosher and non-kosher. And over there, according to Rav, at least you have a problem with the reicha, the aroma, as you called it, being a problem. But we don't. First of all, we don't hold like that Gemara, or like Rav, I should say. We hold reicha lav milsa here. But that was one explanation given, that perhaps that's what the Tur is taking it from. That heter is mefatem the isur. The fat will be mefatem the isur. Just like over there, there's a pitum going over from one to the other. But that's very difficult to accept because we don't hold like that, like the Reicha. So one svara is a chanan. Chanan means that a little bit of the fat goes into the isur, it becomes chanan, and then chanan goes back and asers the whole thing. But we don't hold chanan b'shar yisurim according to the mechaber. So chanan is not.
So we would be surprised when the mechaber holds.
Yeah, the mechaber therefore
would make sense.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah, but the mechaber therefore, according to the mechaber, this wouldn't work out.
Did you happen to encounter?
Yeah.
Anyone said not talking about the fat is the one who is prohibiting that, but rather the fat is fulfilling a whole different role. Simply like a taxi.
Yeah.
It's transferring the is. It's not that the fat has become asur
Right.
and is now asuring something beyond the isur that it was bolea. It's not the one thing that is asuring. It's just the transfer aid.
Yeah.
Like water in a pot releases the blia such that it is transferred throughout the pot. Here the fat is fulfilling a similar role.
Yeah. Well, we will see a similar concept in the next point of Isur Balua, or what exactly is the pitum doing. because the mefatim apparently is doing something, according to those who hold Pitum.
Right.
But what is it exactly that's doing? So the way to understand it is the Beis Yosef brings down another question, and from that we understand the logic here. He has a question on the Torah. How come he says that, what's the difference between this halacha of Isur Balua? Between this and the halacha that an Isur Balua does not travel. And remember we said before, Isur Machmas Asmo, yes, Isur Balua, no. Why should there be a difference between this and Isur Balua? Here you say the heter is mefatim the Isur. It goes so far to bring out the Isur and goes back, where the Isur itself cannot go. Isur itself cannot go. The heter can cause it to become more intense all of a sudden. Why is that different than the Torah about Isur Balua? The Isur Balua cannot go anywhere. And we understand the Isur Balua cannot go. So, but why should this be any different? So the Taz, of course, has a big problem with this. But obviously, there is a little bit of a difference. And that is as follows, that the heter, that is fat, is able to penetrate a little bit into the Isur. And what it does is, it makes that Isur a little bit fatty. It does. And as a result of that little bit of fattiness, that kedei netila is more powerful. In other words, it's already going kedei netila. It's not that it's not going, it's already going kedei netila. Since it's already going, as a result of the heter being mefatem, that kedei netila becomes more intense.
So we're not talking about the Isur Balua.
So that's why this pitum is different than an Isur Balua. Isur Balua, of course, cannot go. It just cannot go without roitiv. It doesn't have the koyach to go. Now the Taz has a problem with this. The Taz says, I don't understand. If the Isur Balua is part of a heter, is part of a fatty piece of meat, it will not go anywhere because it's an Isur Balua, even though it's a belia in a fatty piece of meat. How could you expect another heter, to be mefatim the Isur and come back and make the heter Isur? In other words, if the Isur Balua is part of a piece of meat that is fatty, it cannot go anywhere. That's the way the Rashba explains Isur Balua. Even if the Isur Balua is in a fatty piece of meat, it's an Isur Balua, it still cannot go. Unless it in itself is fatty.
That was my
right.
question.
But here you have a piece of meat that's fatty, that does not have a Isur Balua. It's going to stimulate the Isur, and it's going to come back. That's a big chiddush. And that's why everybody has a big question over here. And the Taz says, how could this work? But that's the way you explain. That's why the Bach explains it, that you basically have a little bit going in, making it fatty enough to make that netila even stronger. It's going anywhere. The netila, it's going. The other one is never going. This is going, kedei netila, but because of the fat, it is able to come out and even go even further.
So, but wouldn't you call netila and Isur Balua in the heter now? Let's say it
Well,
was.
Yeah, but it's not the same. It's not the same. Let's just go over to just a couple more points so we can finish this. Lemaisa, the Taz, the Pri Chodosh, the Gra, they all say that we have no concerns about Pitum at all. That's what's interesting. The Shach, the Mogen Avron, the Pri Megadim, Chochmas Adam, Mishnah Brewer, and Chazanish says that there is din Pitum. So
Now this is specifically about
Pitum, altogether Pitum, the whole
Even
concept
if
of
the-
Pitum,
even
yes,
if
the
the
heter,
Isur
forget about
is
Isur Balua, yes.
Even if
No, not if the Isur is Shomen.
if the
Heter to be mefatem. Big machloikas here. What is the nafkamina? The nafkamina is, since the Ramah says we're not such a bekim between kochosh and Shomen, okay, there would be a nafkamina therefore. In the case of a hefsa meruba, if you have the Isur kochosh, heter Shomen, that you could say it's not mefatem. Yeah, right. Just quick few points about some of the questions that were raised. Pri Megadim has a suffix if the din pitum is only shayach if they're both hot, or do we say if the heter is shomen and is soinen if it's mefatem? Do we say pitum only when the two of them are hot? Pri Megadim has a suffix, or if the soinen is fat. I'm saying if the heter is a fat, but it's soinen, do we still say it has the power to be mefatem? You follow me? He has a suffix, the Pri Megadim. What happens if the heter is cold? Okay?
The heter is cold.
It's cold, but it's fatty. Will the fattiness in a cold piece of meat also be mefatem? He has a suffix about that. Another suffix, in the case of tzoinen shomen, that is munach al isur cham, kochush, right? Shaman, if it's sitting on top, right?
So we have here a din of mefatem.
According to Pi Chodesh, we have a din of pitum. Okay, so we have the Pi Megadim, it has a suffix legabi pitum altogether, unless if they're both not hot, only one of them is hot. And here, in the case of tzonin that's on top of an Isur Cham, kochush, according to the Pi Chodesh, you would have pitum because of tatog. Even though the tagavar, the one at the bottom is not the one that's fatty, still it would work. The pitum would still work even though the one on top is cold and it's shaman. Dogam Meruvava says that we don't say the din of pitum by tatagavar. From the Beis Yosef is mashma that there is a din of pitum by Melicha if the bottom one is salty. We're going to see later on in Sif Test the Mechaber holds that there is pitum by Melicha altogether. Tur doesn't say that. Okay, we explained the Ramah about the difference between the plito of a keli and the plito from a machol. There's a difference between the two of them. But the interesting thing about a plita from a keli, you roast it in a keli, even though we say that the plita is there, even though there's no liquid, it's only kedei klipa. It's not kedei netila. By its sli, it's kedei netila. It appears to be that everybody's mekel to require only kedei klipa. The shach,
now, right?
yeah, actually it's hot, but the shach says if it's a little bit of watery, a little bit of liquidy, saucy, you would take a kedei netila. He has a suffix if it's an isu shaman balua in a keli. What then? Shaman was balua in the keli. Do you still say only kedei klipa? Because there seems to be a leniency here that even though there is a plita from the keli without any liquid, it's only kedei klipa. It's not even it's not even kedei netila. Usually by tzli is netila. By here it's a kedei.
Because it's a belia. Because if it was in a meichel, we would.
Right. Okay, then we had the din of you stuck in a fleishike spoon into rice that was milchix. That also was a case that's brought down in the shach. The shach says the keli is aser. The tas doesn't seem to say that the keli is aser here because the milk is a balua. Right? What do we say about the food? Food that has a belia, it will not go out into a keli.
We don't have roitiv here.
You don't have roitiv here. But some say that rice that is milchix, I mean, the whole thing the whole thing has become milky. It's not a real belia. It's not like a gush, piece of solid meat. It's rice. It's a dover bolul mixture. So could be that's why the shach is machmir. We're not even talking about now that the food is becoming aser. The rice is becoming fleishix or milchix. We're talking about the kli. The kli does not become aser from a belia, the spoon. But apparently here it does, according to the shach at least. But it's a machlokes shach and taz. Okay. One last item. Yeah, but just to finish. One last item. Basar b'cholov. Okay, so we don't forget. Basar b'cholov is a big machlokes. So we said, is it an isur machmas asma or is it an isur balua? Everybody holds it's chanan, but there's a famous rashba here that says even though it's chanan, it's still an isur balua. It's still an isur balua, and if I can only separate the two, the milk from the meat, it would be fine. The meat will be okay, even though we hold if is asur. You cannot take out ever completely the Isser. For purposes of this halacha, if Basar b'chalav touched another piece of meat, all that is being emitted is a tam of Basar and not of the belia of chalav. The chalav is still considered a belia, according to the Rashba. That's a big chiddush here. Mechaber doesn't say that. Mechaber says Basar b'chalav Isur machmas asmoi, chanan, just like a nevela. But according to the Rashba, this would be, yes, chanan, but for this purposes, I assume that I can separate them. If I can't separate them, all that's going is the tam of the basar, not the tam of the chalav. Not the whole thing is going, just the belia of the basar. That's a big chiddush.
No, we don't have to.
But the taz goes like the Rashba.
It does.
Yeah. And I think, let me see, who else here? The Gra also, like the taz and the Chazon Ish also. The shach is machmir, but the shach says you don't have to take more than a kedei netila. Even though we're not baki between kochosh and shaman, he says in this case, because the b'chalav is really an isur balua in some ways, he says it's okay to only take off on the netila. So if you had a piece of basar b'chalav touching another piece of meat, even though we're machmir like the Ramah not to make a distinction between shaman and kochosh, in this case, it would be okay to be lenient and to only take off a kedei netila.
And we're talking all the time here by tzli.
Yes. Right? So this is very interesting. Yeah. Obviously, the Tur and the Shach, they go based on the Maskon of the Gemara that we hold that basar v'cholav, you cannot separate the cholav from the basar. It becomes chanan, it becomes chaticha nevela. It becomes an isra machmas atzmo. You don't say efshal esoichtoi. Even if you could remove it, the whole thing has become a nevela. So if that nevela is touching another piece of meat, it's going to make it usher. But according to the Rashba, Taz, the Gra, they hold no. The actual piece of meat is mutter completely. I don't know if I said it clearly. If they're roasting close to each other, they're actually, the piece of meat, according to those who hold that it's a form of Isa Balua, it would be mutter. All that came out was the tam of the basar, not the basar of a cholav. That's very interesting. Yeah. And as a result of that, we have a nice machloikas over here. For the mechaber, it's not mashma like that, but once you start learning the noise kelim here, you start seeing that it's not so simple. That it's an isur machmas asmo for purposes of tzli. For purposes of tzli. Yes, it's true, it's a chanan, everybody says so. But for purposes of tzli, it's still a form of isur balua. And what do we say about isur balua? It doesn't go anywhere without roitim.
I still find it very confusing. Maybe
right. Yeah.
The meat absorbed milk.
Right.
Now this milk is not an isur. It's perfectly kosher milk.
Right.
The meat is not an isur. It's perfectly meat.
Right.
So why do we call the milk that was absorbed an balua? It's not an isur. It's a milk balua.
You're right. It's a milk balua, but it's a blia.
So if I have a milk balua,
right.
and I have a meat that was boiled, that absorbed it, so where is my isur now?
It has become usher, right?
Why
the whole
is
thing.
The milk more of an isur than the meat? It's the combination.
It's a combination of the two, right?
So the meat is no less a combination of the two.
Right, but right now when they're touching, what's going to the next piece of meat?
Only. It's an isur, and that meat is nevela.
Yeah, but for the Rashba says for this purposes of this halacha,
yes.
It's not a real nevela machmas atzmoi.
Yes,
it's only because the milk is there. But if I can separate the milk, it wouldn't be. It wouldn't be aser. Elamai, we don't separate the milk. But for purposes of tzli, all that is going is not the chalav and the basar here. All that's going is only basar. And if it's only basar, it's good kosher basar. And therefore, it would not even be aser. According to the ones who hold it is aser, of course, it would be only aser kedei natila. Okay, we'll stop here.